Hey there, I'm Cindy Renna, and you're listening to Homeschooling Outside the Box, where I help you build a homeschool that fits your unique family. Hello, and thank you so much for listening. Today, we have got a very special guest. I am here with Rachel Kovac, who is a writer, a speaker, and a photographer. I am so excited to have Rachel on because she offers a very unique voice to the homeschooling community, especially for parents navigating the teen years. So while much of the homeschooling conversation focuses on early years, Rachel brings a firsthand experience and encouragement for families continuing through high school. And that is what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to the show, Rachel.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so happy to talk with you today.
Me too. Okay, so can you get us started by just telling us a little bit about yourself, your family, and maybe how you got started homeschooling in the first place?
Yeah, so I'm the mother of six kids, and I sometimes joke that, like C.S. Lewis says, he was the most reluctant convert. I was maybe the most reluctant homeschooler. I didn't know that this story is kind of cliche. I feel like I meet a lot of homeschoolers that are like, from the moment I was pregnant, I knew this would be my path. That wasn't my story at all. I write in the book how I had a lot of fear and really, I didn't see myself as being qualified to homeschool. There were so many things that held me back. I didn't know if I had the capacity. I didn't know if I had the emotional capacity. I didn't know about trusting myself with my kids' education. And so we started homeschooling when my son was in third grade. And I had always been interested in education from the beginning. And we had done alternative education for his first, through preschool and kindergarten for him. But then when he got into a traditional school setting, it just wasn't the right fit. He didn't get to have recess. Um, he couldn't talk at lunchtime. They had a red light on. He would come home with a big stack of worksheets. And then having a large family, it was just so much to keep up with, not only the commuting and the extracurricular activities and all of those things, but then the homework at night when they're so exhausted. And so through a series of unfortunate events, things that fell through, I thought I would be homeschooling temporarily. And then we ended up thinking, I'll try it for the summer. If it doesn't work, I can send them to school in the fall.
Mhm.
And it ended up being the right choice for my family. But I would say to anyone in that position, you can take it year by year, you know?
Yeah, that's great. We had a similar story. We started in public school, and I was always the worst public school mom. The teacher lovingly called me just a hot mess because I could never figure out what was due when and where to. Yeah, so homeschool
Why is
does
it
give
so
you lots of freedom.
confusing?
No, I'm like, I don't care if he wears purple on Thursday. Right. So, definitely very similar path. Okay, but you have a very special interest in the high school years, and your new book is called Their Future is Shining Bright. And I love this book. I think I just read it so quickly. I have a million book darts and notes in it. And I think, well, you even say this in the book that you were struck with the absence of information about homeschooling in high school. And I totally agree. If you go on Instagram or um, really any of the homeschool places on the internet are going to have a lot of information about getting started or the younger years. And then it seems like everyone gets a little quiet talking about high school, and we need this book. So why do you think that is? Why do you think there is so little information? And then how did that cause you to want to write this book?
Yeah, so I can't say for sure how much information is out there. I think I may have hurt someone's feelings who does talk on the high school years because they wrote to me and said, "Well, I have all of this. How does your work compare?" And I said, I hadn't seen it. So I am not really sure because I'm not online very much and I was off of social media for a long time. But when I was homeschooling through the high school years, which my son is now 21,
Hmm.
I didn't see it. And maybe maybe it was just me, but I also think there's something different about having teenagers when it comes to a visual platform like Instagram, where maybe they don't always want to have their picture taken. It's their story. Maybe they don't always want their story told. Even in the writing of my own book, I have had to talk with my kids and say, are you comfortable with me sharing how this
Mhm.
played out for you? Um, because ultimately, this is your story to share. It's both of our stories, but when I'm telling their story, I feel like they have the say about what is shared and what is not shared. And some of the things that I share in my book are from our own disappointments and some of the things that we didn't know. Um, and I was trying my best to get access to information, but then I was told things that were false. And I don't think anyone was trying to lead me astray. It
Sure.
just so happened that that's how it was. So
Sure.
it's,
Well, I think too the younger years are easy to and this is how I took it in your book because I do agree with it. I just don't think there's as much out there, but I don't think we glamorize homeschooling in the high school years the same way we sort of glamorize it in this like look at all this freedom and come and try this. And then I think what happens in high school is things change so much that maybe that could be why there's not as much of that. But you made a good point about it becomes a lot more of their story too. And so a lot of the social media and things, they might not want any part of that. So we don't, I guess we just don't see it as much. And that can make it feel like there's less information. But you definitely saw that there was an opportunity or a need for a book like this. So what is it that led you to write this book?
yeah, so I felt for the most part confident in homeschooling through the high school years
Mhm.
until my son was a senior. And he knew he wanted to go to college. He knew he wanted to become a doctor, and he's doing
Mhm.
great. So even this all said, I mean, he's doing amazing. This last weekend, he was in New Orleans. He just presented to the American College of Cardiology with research that he did with the Mayo Clinic. They chose him to be the lead presenter. He's published. Everything is going very well for him. Uh, but when it came time to navigate the college admissions process, it was just very overwhelming. And I think things have changed a lot. And I write about this in the book. In general, even if your child isn't homeschooled, it's
Mhm.
different than what it was like when I was applying to college back in the late 90s. And so I think that I was surprised by that. Also, the larger homeschool community that I was a part of would say a lot of things like, if you're homeschooling and you're out of the box, Ivy Leagues are going to be like scouting your kid. And there are AI models and homeschooling websites that say the acceptance rate at Ivy League schools is 27%. And when I was trying to get to the bottom, I write about this in the book. It took me forever to get to the bottom of where that statistic was coming from because
Mhm.
people kept citing other homeschooling websites. And finally, I found out that I believe it was in the late 90s, Stanford had 15 homeschoolers apply back when it was very fringe. And they ended up accepting four, which came out to 27% of homeschoolers are
Oh,
accepted
yeah.
into Stanford. And so homeschoolers do get into college, but I had this idea that my kids were going to get lots of scholarships, that the college admissions process would be easy. And then my son was accepted to the school he wanted to go to, but he didn't get the scholarships that he wanted. And the
Mhm.
tuition was going to be 65,000 per
Wow.
year.
Wow.
And that's another thing, like navigating the cost of college tuition, thinking about college debt. Those were
Mhm.
all things that weren't so much on my radar because that's changed so much since I was in college myself. Um, and so I think I had to learn some of those lessons. My son was also going through the process with another friend who had been homeschooled and was really disappointed with the college admissions process.
Mhm.
Beyond that, I didn't know until we were taken under the wing of someone who had a lot of experience, actually, two people who then ended up helping me in my book. One is a college advisor who literally charges thousands per student. He felt sorry for homeschooling students. He came beside me. He spent 6 hours reviewing my final chapter on
Wow.
the college admission process. So I learned so much from him, but also someone who does dual enrollment in our city of 1.5 million, who's really on the cutting edge of dual enrollment across the country.
Yeah.
And he shared a lot about all the options, not just for college paths, for all kinds of paths, for
Mhm.
apprenticeships, for certification programs, for trade school. Just really, there are so many options beyond college. And so that was eye-opening to me too.
Yeah. Yeah, you have definitely done the hard work for us. These are all questions that I have struggled with. We have three boys in this target audience graduating and getting ready to launch into the world. And then my 12-year-old daughter has got some time, but I feel like I'm going to be so much more prepared for her because of all the hard work that you put in. I told my sons as we were navigating college applications and things, I thought, this is the one time I wish you had a high school guidance counselor. Like
Yeah.
the one time I was like, man, I really need someone else to do this or take this or help me do this.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes homeschoolers get freaked out in terms of high school about transcripts. Okay, rest easy. That's no big deal. In
Right,
terms of creating a transcript, it's really not. Like, it seems intimidating, but it's not.
right.
But I think like trying to think through the classes that they should take, the opportunities that they should pursue,
Yeah.
getting them ready for their unique path, that does take a little more forethought. And now,
Hmm.
as much as I've also thought, I had this same thought as you. Like, I wish I had a guidance counselor to come alongside of me. But people say in school settings, they don't necessarily get that much time either. It probably depends on the school.
Sure.
Um, yeah, like I've heard people say, "Oh, I wish my child had gotten," like they didn't know all that was available to them either.
Hmm.
And like I said, it probably depends on the school, but
Right, right. But there's definitely some digging to do. So I do think that is a huge reason why people might feel skittish about homeschooling in the high school years. You also mentioned dual enrollment. That's a whole another conversation. But that and transcripts and college are pretty big reasons that can scare people off. But there is one more reason, and you brought this up in your book, and it's that high school experience. You know, the
yeah.
the idealistic high school experience. And it's so funny because my husband, if you knew him, you would laugh that he asked this. But when we first decided to homeschool and the kids were so little, his first question, he said, "What about prom?" And I thought, you didn't even go to your prom. What do you care about prom? But what he was asking was this question. What about the high school experience? What about friends and homecomings and football games and, that idealistic high school experience? So what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's so funny you would say that because just last week I was doing a podcast with Greta Eskridge
Hmm.
and she pointed this out and she said she was homeschooled as a first generation
Uh-huh.
homeschooler. And that was the question that she would get asked most of all too. And it was prom. And
Yeah.
she was like, I'm volunteering, I'm working, I'm traveling the world with my dad. And you're concerned about prom?
Yep. You need a prom. It's in every high school movie.
But I will say now, at least in the city where I live and from the folks I talk to, a lot of times prom is still an option for homeschoolers. They have community groups that do a prom. So if you are concerned about prom, that can still be an option for you. But yes, that was the same question that my kids got, not from their peers, but
Hmm.
from parents who would be concerned. But what about the high school experience? And so in chapter one, I go into, well, where does that idea even come from? So I didn't know about the history of the formation of high school myself, but I was fascinated. In fact, with Tyndale, I had to go through that chapter literally like 5 times because I wanted to put in so much research about the
Hmm.
formation of school.
That's another book, I think.
I think it could be another book.
Yes.
It was just so interesting to learn about how historically kids have never spent so much of their time surrounded primarily by peers. And of course, peer relationships matter. Of course, it's very
Hmm.
important for our kids to have time with their peers. And what that looks like, I write in the book too, it depends on our children. Like so much of this depends on for some children, they're going to have a few close relationships and they're going to go really deep around maybe shared interests. For others, they might be involved in big group activities and that's more of their speed. But I think that there are so many options now available to homeschoolers that you can really choose. Homeschooling is the
Yeah.
fastest growing form of education in the US. It's growing 7 times faster than private school enrollment, while public school enrollment continues to decline. In the state of Texas, where I live, I just read in the Houston Chronicle that we have twice as many homeschoolers as we do those enrolled in or private school, which I
Wow.
found so surprising. And so with that comes so many more resources. It's not like
Sure.
the olden days of homeschooling where you're going to be the only one for most of us.
Right.
So I think that that's amazing too, that you talked earlier about how people don't glamorize the teen years. They're probably harder to glamorize, but I think they are so special. Like the
Yeah.
potential for late night conversations and beautiful discussions and interests that are shared in a way that's harder to do when they're younger. It's so fun. And these years are so special and they're worth sharing about. So,
Yes. And I want to come back to that in just a minute about how that looks, how your homeschool changes when you have high schoolers and how that family focus can still be there. But you said something that made me think, there's this image of what high school is supposed to look like, and there's this false guarantee. I went to high school, and like most people who went to high school, I'm sure they will tell you not everybody has an equal experience. It's not, they might not even want an equal experience, or they may want one and they have a horrible experience. So just because you
mhm.
homeschool doesn't mean you're missing this idealistic experience. There's no guarantee.
Exactly. Exactly. And I write about this too, that I learned from going into the research on the teenage brain that the teenage brain is more sensitive to feelings of rejection and experiences are more sticky. They stay with us longer. And I
Hmm.
think a lot of us have experiences from high school that, maybe involved boyfriends or girlfriends or cliques that were
Hmm.
damaging to us that then went on to shape the way we perceived friendship or the way that we perceived intimacy. I carried with me things into my marriage because of various things that had happened to me in high school that I then brought into college. And that,
Yes.
and of course, we can't protect our kids from everything. But I think a lot of those decisions did come from being in an environment where there was a lot of pressure for conformity
Hmm.
and not a lot of wisdom being spoken into my life by adults who
Hmm.
had something to add. Like it was out of balance.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And I think with the guarantee, like if they go to high school, then a guidance counselor will give them all this help and they'll get into college and they'll get all these scholarships or they'll have all these fun experiences. And right, weighing the damage, I definitely, same of you. I have things that, are unnecessary growing pains. I feel like
Mhm.
our kids don't necessarily have to experience all these things. And our homeschool group actually just hosted our spring formal last Friday, and we had 80 people there. And watching these kids get out there and dance like with abandon, and we do a mix of ballroom dancing and freestyle, and they just are the most confident, relaxed, fun kids to be around. And all the adults there, the conversation in the room was, can you even imagine acting this way at your high school prom or a dance? Like, can you even imagine being this comfortable or not caring what other people think? Or, just there was a comfort level that I think is not typical of teenagers. And I think that a lot of that is not having to go through those unnecessary, um, like you had said, like the clicks and the conformity.
Well, and also I think it's interesting that I learned that the length of the day was determined initially by child labor. So child labor was something
Okay.
that was a big problem in the US. And children were brought to factories and mills, and they were having trouble making a national a law at the national level to get children out of factories because some
Hmm.
people were saying it was a violation of constitutional rights. And so, in order to sort of get around that, they required children to be in school so
Hmm.
that they would not be in factories. But the length of the school day was sort of arbitrary in a sense. It wasn't based on, okay, this is the best day for learning. This is the
Yeah.
best amount of time for learning. This is the best way to nurture the teenage mind or the teenage soul. Um, and so what I love about high school, homeschooling high school, is that it's more like college, actually.
Yes.
You
Yes.
do classes, but you still have time to pursue your interests. And
Hmm.
that's why the kids can have more confidence because alongside of doing things related to academics, like my son restored a vintage Land Rover with his dad, and he also built a fire tower and learned to play 6 different instruments because music is his thing. And so he had time to do that, and he had time for friends, and he
Hmm.
had time for our family because the high school years aren't so rigorous in terms of the academics compared to what my kids are facing now being STEM majors at a SEC college. I mean, they have to study a lot now. They still had to study, but I mean, there was still a lot of time for other
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's talk about what the home environment looks like and how that kind of changes in the high school years because I feel like the elementary years are the sweet spot of homeschool. You're in charge of everyone's schedule. You can set the day. Your morning time isn't restricted because someone has to go to work, and so all these other elements start coming into play in the high school years, jobs and sports and activities and dual enrollment classes and friends become more important. And once they can drive, that's a whole new ball game. So how can you preserve that that sweetness that is so present in homeschooling, but also so important as kind of the core of your homeschool in the high school years?
Yeah, so I think for us, that's looked like really guarding our morning time as much
Hmm.
as possible. So that is our time when we would try to make sure that everyone could be together. And sometimes we had to make some concessions, but as much as possible, we did try to say these are our hours that are sacred to our family life.
Hmm.
And then let's try to schedule dual enrollment, co-op classes, and things like that outside of that. Now, we do have one day a week where my kids go to a co-op. And so 4 days a week, we're doing our morning time. So
Hmm.
that's kind of how we've made that work. I think as they get older, we have to also hold them with a bit of an open hand, knowing that it is normal for them to want to be more independent. And it's good. Throughout human history, kids in the teen years were beginning to pursue apprenticeships, and
Hmm.
even some went to college in the teen years. And so I think it's natural that they're going to want to stretch their wings and try out different things and spend more time with friends. I think, but if we can still try to keep that balance by having certain times or that are sacred in our family life. And for us, that looked like morning time.
Yeah. And we are huge proponents of morning time, and I agree that has been sort of our anchor that
Yeah.
keeps everybody together, or we can at least start the day together, figure
Hmm.
out who's doing what, and then everyone launches. What are some of your favorite things to pull into morning time? You talk about humanities in the book and how, they make us human, and that is so critical because someone might argue, well, okay, if you have someone in high school, but then I also have a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old, like what could we all be sitting there doing together? So
Yeah, we
what have
still
you
do
found?
that. We
Yeah,
still do all of that. And we've done it like that for a long time. I think sometimes people underestimate what a small child can get out of
yeah,
things. But also, I don't require. So, if we're reading something that's more difficult, first of all, I just think every family should read what's important to them and what they want to
yeah.
bring to the table. And that has continued to set a tone for our home life. I mean, I just did an interview with my kids, an audio that I hope to, you know, put out on the internet somewhere at some point about their reflections on being homeschooled in high school. But that was still such a big part of our family life, the reading
Hmm.
aloud, sharing books together. But so much of it you can do. And if it's something that's maybe a little over their head, like we've been reading Augustine's Confessions right now. I did it. I also read parts of it with my older kids when we studied the Divine Comedy. But right now we've been revisiting it with my kids who are at home. And
Hmm.
I don't expect that my 8-year-old's going to get everything.
Sure.
And that's okay. Like she can color, she can paint, she often just wants to hang out. She's not a super active child. She's not a very kinetic child necessarily, but we don't have to expect them to be completely locked in. And then
Hmm.
we do things that can work for everybody. Like right now, we did a very intense study of history. We ended up spending 3 weeks in Italy and France because my husband works for a European company. So we spent 2 years
Nice.
really seriously studying Latin,
Mhm.
all things related to the history of Europe. I learned Italian. My daughter learned French. One of my other daughters learned Amharic because she was born in Ethiopia. So we're all learning three different languages. We're not very practical. Um, but after that, I realized there were some books I wanted to get back to. So the Little House on the Prairie series, The Hobbit, we could do all those things together. Like that's just not for one certain age range. And so I
Mhm,
think allowing, like, read what actually makes you come alive. Don't
mhm.
feel like you have to be locked into any one curriculum. I think that's the one thing I feel having homeschooled longer. Like, do what brings you life. If it aligns with that which is good and beautiful and true, I don't think you can go wrong with that.
Yeah.
And I think kids get more out of it than we might expect.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good point. Um, okay, well, let's talk about some of the advantages of homeschooling through the high school years. You had mentioned dual enrollment as one of them, co-ops, other opportunities. You talked about your son rebuilding, what was it, a Jeep with your husband?
It was a Land Rover. Yeah,
A
my
Land
husband
Rover.
grew up
Yeah.
in West Africa, so he found somehow during COVID a Land Rover that was from England. People
Wow.
would say, if you ever lose your job, you can become a mailman because it's like geared toward driving on the other side of the road.
That's too
But
funny.
yeah, there's so much that they can pursue.
Yeah, and these are things that really help set them up for what their next step is going to be. And I think what
Mhm.
you did so beautifully in this book, and I personally have never seen it laid out like this. Your the appendix, well, you've got three in here, right? So you talk about how to build a transcript, you talk about college applications, but then you give a whole section called 265 career and certification paths that don't require a 4-year college degree. And I think that is information that we're usually having to look under rocks for. I think you can probably find it pretty easily, like college applications and things. Um, but this was so helpful to just broaden the view of there's not just one path. And yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was okay. So this really blew my mind to learn. In the early 2000s, 300,000 students in the US had some form of dual enrollment. Okay, this is why when my son was going through high school, I didn't really know a lot about it because I'm
Hmm.
coming out of my own experience. And we did a lot of really interesting classes, but just not dual enrollment really, which made life hard for him in college because so many. Okay, I'm going to continue with the statistics.
Yeah.
By 2021, 1.5 million students in the US had dual enrollment.
Wow.
Now it's 2.8 million.
Wow.
So education is really changing, and it's
Yeah.
not for precocious students who want to get ahead in college only anymore.
Hmm.
It's for students of all paths. So right now in my city, there are 6,000 students pursuing paths in um, the trades, apprenticeships, certifications, where they can graduate high school and earn money as soon as they're done with their graduation.
Yeah.
It's not just about going to college anymore. It's looking
Hmm.
at a new way of learning and understanding high school education that maybe one path isn't for every child and
Hmm.
that we can have more options than we ever knew were possible. And I had no idea that all this was possible before I started working on this project, which began with connecting with a dual enrollment advisor here, who, like I said, took us under his wing and reviewed two of my chapters in depth. We were doing Zoom calls, and we actually led a little conference for our community before this book was a thing.
That's amazing. And it's so needed because you're right. I think people don't know. I didn't know. And it's not until you go through it you realize, like you said, going off of what my experience was, I thought, okay, junior year, like end of junior year, let's start looking at this. Oh no. I mean, it's essentially junior and senior year are years where you're pivoting towards whatever path you're going to take. So if it's
Yeah,
college, like all your focus, those 2 years are about the ACT and applications and whatnot.
yeah. So I think you're right that that's a great time. And also it's not just about meeting a goal. Like I have this goal of getting into this college. It is about that, but it's not only about that. It's also about career discernment.
Hmm.
So, okay, the average student right now, even with dual enrollment, takes okay, 44% of students graduate in 4 years or less, but the majority still take around 5 years. And at least one third, this is where the statistics get kind of slippery, they change their major. And
Yeah.
so a kid can start, you know how many kids come in? My son's pre med. right now. And a lot of kids come in and they are like, oh, yeah, I want to be a doctor. And then
Mhm.
they start taking the classes and they're like, no, there's no way I want to do this for the next 8 or 15 years or whatever it is.
Right.
They're like, no, I'm not interested. This is like not for me.
Hmm.
And so a lot of kids are changing majors. And I think the cool thing about exploring at the end of high school is you can start to get a feel for what you want.
Yeah.
That saves time, that saves money.
Hmm.
It gives, and for some kids, college isn't the right path. They might learn that. And that's wonderful too, because um, the advisor I worked with talked about how a lot of kids carry baggage if they decide to drop out. And so, if they
Hmm.
can kind of get a taste for it while they're still in the high school years, and I'm not saying that this is for every child. I have a child who is a sophomore in high school, and I don't think she's ready to start going into dual enrollment quite yet. She
Hmm.
has a different path, and that's okay. She has dyslexia, she has dyscalculia. College or community college grades are permanent. I want her to go in when she really feels testing gives her some anxiety.
Hmm.
So I we have the gift of time with homeschoolers, with homeschooling. We don't have to have our children on the fast track,
Hmm.
but we get to choose based on each individual child. And there are other things that she can do to help her gain clarity, like job shadowing. That's something I write about in the book,
Yeah.
interning. She was super jazzed to get a lifeguarding certification. She did that all on her own, went through it so quickly. And she's making a lot of money lifeguarding.
Hmm.
And so, they can explore things that they think are right for them, but we don't have to push dual enrollment either.
Right.
It
Right.
depends on the child, don't you think?
I absolutely. We have had a couple false starts with dual enrollment, and even I had a child start a dual enrollment class, and then we realized, okay, we had pushed that, and he waited until the following year, and then it was perfect. It was obviously the
Exactly.
right choice, but he wasn't ready yet. And so you're right. I think the gift of time is one of the biggest, best things we have with homeschooling. They're not surrounded by a whole class of people who are panicking about their ACT score or talking about college applications. It's not, you're not as under the microscope as maybe some kids in the public or private school systems. Um,
And
yeah.
some homeschoolers think, I'm going to try this. If my kid doesn't do well, I just won't put it on their transcript. That's not how it works. I didn't know this either, but
Okay.
actually, that grade is colleges, at least here in our state, can do a search of a database and see how a child did if they were enrolled in any classes. So even if you don't include it, it can be discovered, at
Yeah.
least in my state. And so, really knowing whether they're ready and not pushing them prematurely if they're not, because I also write in the book, there are so many options for classes online that your child could audit, whether it's through
Hmm.
edX, through homeschooling offerings, through Harvard. There are
Yeah.
tons of options available online, and your child could get a taste for something that way, and you could put it on their high school transcript without getting dual enrollment. So,
Exactly. Yep. But there's definitely lots of options those last 2 years. And I think it's such a good time to let them explore
mhm,
before they graduate. Okay. So, one thing you mentioned in the book, this is more of the sentimental side. So, we've talked a lot about practical things, about transcripts and dual
mhm,
enrollment, all of that. But um, moms, have been a part of this homeschool experience the whole time too.
mhm.
And so graduation time can really pull on your heartstrings. And
Oh,
while there's so many practical and pressure-based things to do, there's also the reality that you just poured, whether it was 12 years or, if you didn't homeschool the whole time, less than that, but you just poured all these years into your child and you've had this experience that is really unique and really precious. And so you talk about stones of remembrance. And can you just talk about that a little bit and how you see the transcript and even just some of these end of the education things as stones of remembrance?
thank you so much for bringing that up because you're the only person who's ever brought this up. I didn't even know if people would read it because it's
I'm
at that
super sentimental.
it's the end of chapter 10. It was really funny. So Tyndale was like, I think we need something sort of, so it's not too much information, something kind of feeling about um transcripts. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is an impossible task. I'm like, Lord, show me what,
Right.
because I don't know. And then my scripture reading for the day happened to be Stones of Remembrance.
Ah,
When I had this chapter due, which was how everything went the year I was writing that book. Like so many things went wrong. And so it was like every day, like clinging to the hem of Christ's garment, like,
right.
please give me what I need for today. But anyway, yeah, so I just thought about how our transcripts, they are a part of the story. They're part of
Yeah.
our story, all of the things that we did together. And you might think you're not going to forget. And maybe people have a better memory than me, but I'm also in
Right.
perimenopause.
Yes.
And it's like, I can't even believe with my son who's 21, like, oh my gosh, we did that. We did this. How
Right.
wonderful. So there are those things, but then also just soaking in the moments, because when our children are small, it's so easy to soak in all
Mhm.
those moments with them and to take the pictures and to save the things that seem like their first haircut and
Yeah.
those little things that mattered so much. But these years are so important too.
Yeah.
And I can just say from my own experience, it's so worth it. And
Mhm.
we still talk about the books and the jokes. And when my kids were home for spring break, we talked about all the things that went so wrong.
Yeah.
And my son used to say, it will either be a good time or a good story.
Yeah. I love
And
that.
it's like, wow, it's like really become a good story now. Like he's like, can you believe that actually happened?
Mhm.
And so I think all of these things that we are doing to have a tangible way of remembering, whether that's through the
Mhm.
transcripts, yes, and trying to see that you might not always remember everything you guys pursued together.
Yeah.
And so let's hold on to that, but also print photos, write down the stories, write down the things that meant the most to you. More than ever right now, I've been into commonplacing, taking the
Mhm.
things that I'm reading and writing it in a notebook. And that's been a really meaningful practice too. So it's just so worth it.
It is. I think one of my favorite things from our homeschool is either their nature journals or we
Oh,
did timeline books. And so we would just have one timeline book per child, like for their whole education. So when they started, the drawings are really kind of crazy, the handwriting silly. And then
mhm.
you just watch it grow and develop and they're writing down what is memorable to them. So those are really sweet things to hold on to. I
Mhm.
agree. All right, what is some encouragement you can give to moms who are in this season in terms of how to help your child take that next step? I hesitate to say launch because they might not be launching anywhere quite yet, or depending on, a lot of people in my audience have kids with autism or ADHD or dyslexia. And so all these paths can be very, very different. What would you say to the mom who's just about to help her child take that next step after the high school years?
Yeah, I think to just hold on to the idea that each of our kids is on their own timeline. And I write in the book about how some pathways are very straightforward. The dual enrollment advisor I worked with said a lot of times firstborns know exactly what they want and they just
Mhm.
go after it. But sometimes, secondborns, thirdborns, a baby with a family might not have as much direction. And that's okay. Just because a path hasn't been revealed yet doesn't mean that something's wrong. It doesn't mean that that path is lost.
Mhm.
So I think that to know that every child will take a different path, and that's okay. Don't have the same expectations for one child as you might the other. The second
Mhm.
is that there are so many resources. If you're not sure, go speak with someone at your community college. A lot of times they have professionals who this is what they do for a living, and they can help give your child some guidance. If they're
Mhm.
not interested in that at all, whether that's certifications, apprenticeships, whatever, if they're not interested in that, maybe consider job shadowing
Mhm.
or having a Zoom call with someone who does something in the line of work that they think that they're interested in.
Mhm.
I think exposure really matters. How can we know if we don't try? And
Mhm.
so, trying to set our kids up with some of those opportunities to job shadow, intern, connect with an advisor at a college who can help give them more guidance than maybe we might be able to. I think the fact that in the high school years there are more resources available is actually such a win. We have
Mhm.
more support. We don't have to do it all by ourselves. We can do what we love, and then we can outsource or ask for help in the areas where we feel like we need that extra support. And I just think it's wonderful.
And that is such a good reminder because I think we almost and with the growth of homeschool, this I think is getting better, but there's this pressure to know everything. Like you've decided to homeschool your kid. That's a huge responsibility. So then you feel like I need to know everything. I need to be able to do everything. But right, especially in the high school years, it's okay to not know. That doesn't mean you failed at homeschooling them. It means take the resources. These are These are good opportunities.
That's such a good point, too. And I write about this at the end of one of my chapters. I think sometimes for all parents, but
Hmm.
especially maybe homeschooling parents, we can have this feeling like our kids' choices are a reflection on the job that we did.
Hmm.
But even in the story of the Garden of Eden, you have
Right.
a perfect parent who then has children who make decisions that lead to brokenness and pain. And as much as
Mhm.
I have spoken positively about the teenage years, there are people that face a lot of really hard things.
Mhm.
But I think what we can remember is that love always matters, that
Mhm.
love is eternal. No matter what, the ways you poured into your children, that always lasts, that
Mhm.
always matters. The outcomes, regardless of the outcomes, your love for your child will always matter. And it will like ring into eternity because God is love. So I think we can hold on to that too.
I think that is the perfect ending. Well said. Rachel, thank you so much. Their future is shining bright. Hits the book
Oh,
stands on April 21st, right?
yes.
But you can pre-order now, and there's lots of pre-order bonuses.
Hmm. Especially, there's a great one with the dual enrollment advisor who talks about homeschooling myths that a lot of people believe or don't understand about dual enrollment. We cover college paths, non-college paths, stuff that's not available in the book. And then things like offering the humanities to all students with Leah Bowden, who wrote Modern Miss Mason.
Hmm.
We also talk about raising our kids as individuals. Aaron Lochner, the author of The Opt Out Family, discusses screens and our teenagers. I think that was something I didn't cover in the book at all, but that's very important. And then my friend Elle talks about finding community in a lonely world. So I'm really excited about all four of those audios.
Fantastic. Definitely take advantage of that. I will put links in the show notes to the book where you can order and to Rachel's website. You are on Substack, correct?
Yes, I also have a website. It's Rachel Kovac, Kovac. A lot of people think it ends with a K, but it's actually a C.com. And that's where you can find the pre-order bonuses. If you just click at the banner on the top, then you can get access to those instantly. So
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here.
thank
It
you.
was a great conversation, a delight to talk to you.
Oh, likewise. Thanks so much.